So you hear volume? Blah, 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 volume. It's picking up my voice when I talk, when I speak, when I speak, when I speak. When I talk, speak. When I speak, talking. Testing, testing, 1, 2, speak, talking. Does it look like it's shaking? We get to start? Yeah. Alright guys, we're going to go ahead and start. Yeah, no, sorry about the delay. We had some technical difficulties and they're like somewhat fixed now, so we're good. Did anybody pick up Destiny when it came out? Just out of curiosity?
No, but I heard it was a massive disappointment.
Is it any good?
No.
Wow. Eli, you're sick. Anyways, so welcome to week 4. Who here, was everybody here last week? Who wasn't here last week? Okay, awesome. So last week we actually picked the game that we're going to be working on. Today, just so, I know we have team leads and they should have been relaying you some of this information, but I know some of you haven't gotten in contact with your team leads and things like that. So today, some of the things we're going to do is we're going to be going over that game just really briefly on some of the basic mechanics, the basic idea, just so everybody's on the same page of what we're working on. And then as soon as possible, we're going to break into teams with your team leads, and we're going to get to work talking with your teams, figuring out what your guys' next steps are. Artists will start concepting, programmers will get their first tasks, content people will continue working on what they've been working on. So basically, I have a couple announcements. I'll introduce you again to the leads. We'll just have them stand up just so you can visually see who they are. I'll talk a little bit about Trello, because I know some people who've gotten on Trello are kind of confused about how it works or how they get onto a board and how they start collaborating with their team. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll go right into the quick little rundown of Persephone, which is the game that we selected last week. And is this shaking for everybody else?
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure I'm not crazy. Nobody has epilepsy or anything, right? I guess we'd know. So first thing, IndieCade is actually doing this thing called Game U. Game U is a series of workshops, panels, and sessions where basically they're going to be teaching people kind of like beginning and also intermediate, I think beginning and intermediate classes on game design, game programming, and all types of game-related fields and skills. The topics will include programming, various game design techniques, live development demonstrations, beginning art for games, game audio, and even tips on, career paths and things like that. This happened October 9th through the 12th, and it's in Culver City, California. And I've been told that it's possible that we might be able to get a group discount to this. So show of hands, who would potentially be willing and able to go to this? Culver City, like 20 minutes tops? Okay. Well, we'd all carpool probably. Okay, cool. Thanks so much. So we'll probably be trying to work out a deal and see if we can get a group rate. There'll be more information going out about that later, but it'd be really cool if we could go and do that as a group. I think it'd be really great exposure, and I think a lot of people would learn a lot. And who knows? I was talking to Aaron earlier about potentially even partnering with this group and having them come to our meetings or have separate times where they can come in and teach classes specifically to us and our members. More information will be going out about that later. Next thing, shirts. We do still have some shirts available. I know some people bought some today. If you guys are interested in having a shirt, we have them over here somewhere. We have way more white ones than black ones, but they basically have our basic logo on them, and they look like that, all snazzy and pretty. What size is that? This is a large. Does that make you sad? I don't know, maybe it's not your size. So anyways, these are the amounts that we have left of each. So if you're interested in buying one of those, they're $15, not too much money, and we have them all right here, so you can get one today if you'd like. Next thing, leads, just go ahead and stand up. This is Trevor Toma, he's our art lead. Over here is Ryan Walker, he's our content lead. This is Aaron Gutierrez, he's our technical lead. And Joe Sanders, he's not here right now, he's actually a composition major, but he's our sound lead. And I think, who's the guy in here who does sound? Is he here today? Must not be here today. So there's one guy in here who's not one of the composition majors who's doing sound, and He's already in touch with them. So that team's all kind of good to go outside of this group. So Trello. Who here is not on Trello? Raise your hand. Okay, so actually not too many. That's awesome. That's really good, actually. So if you haven't gotten on Trello yet, when we break off into teams today, get your information to your team lead, because Trello, you have to be invited to a board in order to participate. These boards, it's like a collaboration board, so they can put up tasks, or they can put up images or documents and things like that, and everybody can see them, and everybody can look at them, and everybody can talk about them, and that's how these teams are working together. The reason we want everybody on Trello is because each team sees these other boards as well. So it really helps with, the technical team being on board with where the art team is at, and the art team being on board with where the content team is at, and things like that. So we want to keep all our collaboration on those boards so that everybody knows where everybody's at all times. So like I said, it's invite only, so get your leads your email, and then they can invite you to your respective boards. Basically just talked about that. Okay, so like I said, we're going to try and break into teams as quick as possible, but I wanted to go over what Persephone is, what the project we're working on is, just so everybody's on the same page. So this link right here will take you to a folder which has all of Persephone's documents. It has the game pitch in it. It also has, what I'm basing this PowerPoint off of is this document right here, which is kind of like a brief design document. So you guys can see that. Or more like an overall document. So that's the link to have access to all that. The art documents will be going on there as well, technical documents, so you guys can all be in the know on what other teams are doing. So basically the story of Persephone follows this girl, Persephone, who is the daughter of the king of the dead, and she lives up in the mortal realm, but she starts noticing that things are not dying properly or when they're supposed to, so older people are living way longer than they should, things like that. And her dad being the king of the dead, she's like, what's going on? Why aren't things dying? So she kind of goes through down into hell to try and figure out why this job isn't being taken care of. There's 5 layers of hell before she can actually get to her dad's throne room and talk to him. Each one of these layers is controlled by one guardian or gatekeeper is what we're calling them. Each one of these guardians or gatekeepers has their own kind of, what do I want to say, motivations and things they need to take care of in their realm. So before they let you go on to the next level, you have to complete quests for them. Persephone is a kind of a modest necromancer, so she can raise things from the dead, she can summon ghosts and things like that. And that's going to be one of our core mechanics, is her summoning these things to battle enemies and things in these various layers of hell, so that she can complete quests and advance down through until her dad's throne room. So that's going to be kind of the key mechanic as far as like combat and things like that. Basically, once she gets down through all these layers, she finds that her dad's throne has been usurped by a historical conquest figure. So think like, who are we thinking? Cortez. So think Cortez. He's died in the mortal realm and is now in the afterlife continuing his conquests. So he's taken over the throne and he's starting to conquest in hell now, basically. So you basically have to take on him to win the game. So it's going to be a spooky yet whimsical feeling. So think Paranorman, Corpse Bride, Box Trolls, things like that. It's a 2D dungeon crawler. It's going to be top down with a 3/4 view. One of our inspirations on the look, which you'll see in the art document if you check it out, is, don't mind all the tabs. Hey, I know. So basically this kind of view right here, where you're kind of at like a little bit of a 3/4, it's not necessarily going to be 8-bit. In fact, I don't think it's going to be 8-bit at all, right? But just to get kind of the idea of the perspective you're looking at, and notice how everything, I know Diablo is kind of like at an angle when you're walking and stuff. This is just straight up and down, left and right. Nothing too crazy. But that's sort of the view and the perspective that we're going for in this game. Next, as far as technical things, we're going to be on PC, and then hopefully we will be porting to mobile devices, Android and iOS. That way, once this game's complete, you guys can take it with you wherever you go. So if you're ever in a job interview or you just want to show off to your friends, you can pull it up on your phone, and we'll have that accessible for you guys. We're going to be using Unity, so that's of particular interest to the programmers, and version control. You got Bitbucket working, right?
Yeah.
Which should be, I think, normally if you're not a student, there's only like a limit of 5 people. but it's free to .edu emails. And since we're all students, we all have .edu emails, so we can all use that for version control. For those of you who don't know what version control is, it's when the programmers are working on stuff. It makes it so the code isn't being changed by one person and then changed by another person, and they conflict and get all crazy and messed up. Next, mechanics. The movement, we're going to experiment with 2 different movement types at first initially, 4-directional movement and an 8-directional movement. It gets more complicated for the artists when we add 8 directions, potentially if we wanted to go that route, because now instead of just going up, down, left, and right, we have to have animations for going this way, things like that. But we're going to play with it. More key mechanics. So summoning, like I said, she's a necromancer, she can summon these things. They're summoned by will. Will is basically, think of it as kind of like mana in a way. You have a static amount of it, and every time you summon something, it uses some of that. And it gets used as long as that creature is still alive. So say a skeleton costs 5 will to consume, or to summon, and you have 10, you summon it, now you only have 5 left, and you continue to have 5 until that creature goes away, then you get it back. So that's kind of the core concept as far as summoning things. Summoning can occur with hotkeys or UI buttons. So like, we'll have summoning, there's going to be 5 minions total that you can summon. You learn a new minion at each level of hell, basically. And so we'll have 1 through 5, or whatever other keys we decide, to be able to hotkey summon things, or we'll have UI buttons that you can click on to summon them. You also have the option to desummon your minions, because this is a core mechanic and every minion has different like qualities and features. You want to be able to kind of customize your team, I guess you could say, by being able to desummon maybe all your minions. Maybe you don't have the right team, so you desummon all of them at once. Or you can click on them specifically and desummon certain ones so that you can bring new ones into the game. Everybody caught up so far? Everybody's on the same page? Cool. Awesome. As far as combat, minions that you summon as well as enemies have static behaviors, meaning they behave in a certain way unless we tell them otherwise. So basically when they're summoned or when the enemies spawn, they'll have pre-programmed AI, or not pre-programmed AI, but AI that they just kind of start behaving on their own. They'll start attacking on their own, and our minions will attack on their own unless we tell them to go a different direction. I know for me it's super frustrating when I have enemies just attacking the wrong thing and I can't control that. So in this we'll have the ability that, you know, you can point your minions to attack certain things if you want, but if you don't, they'll automatically attack, you know, whatever's closest or whatever's the biggest threat. What else? Oh, that's odd. Summoning twice. Puzzles. This is also going to be a fairly puzzle-heavy game. Each type of minion will have its own static behaviors, like I said, and will behave in a certain way. But those certain static behaviors can be used for doing puzzles. So, for example, zombies might be really good at lifting heavy things. So if you come to a puzzle where there's boulders in the way, you can summon a zombie, click them over there, and then they clear that rubble out of the way. Or wraiths can float across, you know, large distances, big pits, so they can activate a lever to bring down a bridge. Certain puzzles like that. As well, the main character, and we'll talk about this later, she has a basic attack, and she'll be able to use that attack to activate levers. So maybe you have to activate levers in a certain order in order to get something to happen. So we'll have a lot of different puzzles, and you might have an opportunity to write out some of those puzzles, and we can get those implemented into the game. Like I mentioned before, questing is a big part of this. It's very linear quests, so it's not going to be, you know, branching, multiple ending style quests. It's like you get this one completed, you get the next one completed. We got to keep in mind feasibility and actually getting this game done. Is why we kind of had to go that direction. But those quests, the main ones, can contain puzzles if they want, or it could just be as simple as like go kill this guy and then come back to me. We also talked about having side quests. These are optional quests that don't affect the story in any way, shape, or form, but you get perks as far as potential items that you can find, or unlocking bits of the story that are really interesting that otherwise you wouldn't have found out. Next, player actions. So these are things that Persephone herself can actually do. I have in bold right here only one additional ability, which is attack. So our primary ability is summoning things. The only additional ability is attack. When we first started talking about this, we were like, well, what if she could do this, and this, and this, and this, and this? And then we were like, holy crap, there's like 40 different things. We need to keep it simple so we can get it done. So that's why she only has one additional attack. It's a basic swipe attack. It's a fairly weak attack and should be used primarily in emergency situations. So say your minions are engaging some creatures, and then one happens your way, you'll have something to defend yourself with, just so you're not like just trying to run away from it the whole time. It might have a possible knockback, but these are things that the content team will be discussing and that we'll have to balance once it gets implemented. And like I mentioned before, it can be used to activate levers, switches, things like that. She also has basic movement, so she can move, WASD, and then if we're on mobile, we'll implement some sort of directional UI, whether it's a stick or just buttons, things like that. Like I mentioned before, you can find items during questing. Some of the items, they're primarily aesthetic items. We didn't want to have any ability type items or buffing or making your creature stronger, things like that. Because the more we do that, the more balancing it requires. I think there's almost nothing less fun than playing a game that is terribly balanced and it's either one, too easy, or two, just impossibly hard, or just frustrating altogether. So by keeping the core mechanic of just knowing your minions' static abilities and using those in a way that's smart and effective in the situation you are in is going to be our primary mechanic. So we kept these items to be mainly, it changes the outfit Persephone has, or it changes maybe the minions you have right now shoot fire arrows, but you get an item and they can shoot lightning arrows. It does no extra damage, but it's purely an aesthetic kind of thing. Just kind of like cool trinkets and things you can find. We also talked about having drops, so maybe health potions if you get damaged, things like that. And then as far as the inventory system, this is of particular interest to programmers. It should be fairly simple. We're not going to have any picking up items, putting them in, dropping them, or crafting, or any of that stuff. It's going to be a static UI element that basically you click on, and I'm sure you guys have probably played games where it has as many slots as there is items you can find. So you know that, like, oh, I'm missing an item. That's exactly how this is going to work. You'll know exactly how many items are in the game that you can potentially find, and so you'll know if you have a missing slot, like, oh man, I need to go find that side quest so that I can get that item. Next, level transition. So like I said, you're going through different levels of hell by completing quests and satisfying these gatekeepers or guardians. Basically, once you complete all your quests, you can navigate to a door. The door or exit must be unlocked and accessible. Once you get there, to transition to the next level, we've talked about having an animation. Maybe it shows your character like walking down the stairs, while maybe some of the story is narrated to you, or there's images that have narration over them. But this allows for the next level to load in, because if we just tried to have it go right over, then they'll have some boring wait time where maybe it's just a black screen that says loading. But we decided it'd be better to throw in some story and get people interested that way, and also not focus on how long it's taking to load, which shouldn't be very long. What's that?
Yeah,
Is it quick?
will it be like voiceover or voice acting?
Yeah, potentially. That's something we're still talking about, but it's definitely a possibility. Definitely a possibility. I'd like to have it. I think it'd be another element to throw in, especially for our sound team. And I think it makes a more kind of well-rounded game as well. As far as saving is going to be in save rooms. We talked about doing saving where, at any point in time you just hit save game and it saves the state of wherever you are. That's kind of a programming nightmare in some regards, because you have to record where everything is. You have to record exactly where this creature was at this time, exactly where this item was at this time, exactly where you are, exactly where this arrow was. So you have to record where everything was in space and save that information, then access it later. By doing save rooms, we'll be able to save your place in the story. So if you're in the middle of a quest, it still knows you're in the middle of a quest. But it won't remember, where dead bodies are or things like that. So once you spawn, if there was, maybe a creep group that you had killed before, it might be there again. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. And then as far as loading in, your player will appear at the last activated save room. You start in the same position as the story, and you just keep going on your adventure. And that is it for the general rundown. Just really briefly, nothing too complex because we do have our leads. So when you meet with your leads, you can ask questions, but are there any general questions about what we're working on or anything like that?
Is this hell, or is it just kind of a more generic?
I'm looking at the levels, they're like...
Well, that's the thing. Content.
We strictly said this is not hell. It's not.
This is strictly not hell.
It's not related to that religion. It's not related to demons, infernos, and death. It is just a place where people go right after they die. It is the underworld.
So we will refer to it as underworld from now on.
Demonic relation to it.
Okay, perfect. So from now on, we're referring to it as underworld. I was referring to hell because that was easy for me, but underworld is the specific term for it. Like you said, there's not going to be any religious pretenses involved in any of the story or anything like that. So yeah, any other questions?
What's the organization doing?
What do you mean the organization?
It's like, within the hierarchy of the underworld, why do they have the 5 layers instead of just one?
Content again.
It's just to add more depth. If we put everything on one layer and then we try to split all of that among 5 guardians, it kind of can create room for why aren't they fighting each other. If we have 5 layers, you can have a different theme for each layer, giving our team a little bit more creativity and room to work with. And each layer has a different guardian, which they do have their own motivations and intentions to give Persephone a new storyline. The levels are kind of just. The levels in the underworld are literally just, different worlds, as if we would have seen in the game. Does that answer your question?
I think he's saying, so are you on the content team?
No.
No? Are you on the programming team?
Yeah.
We'll try and get with content after to ask that question. I think he's saying more so how do they fit in the grand scheme of things, right? Like, does each one of them has its own, like, job?
Why is the bottom level the bottom level?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, so those are things that content's answering. I don't know if Emily, for instance, who is the one who pitched this game idea and who's the mastermind behind the whole story element, if she's thought that through. I'm sure it's there, but that's one thing that the content team is working really hard on, is fleshing out all these story details. So those aren't as important right now, but they will be coming to light in the very, very near future. Their Trello board is super active. They've been really good about figuring all these different storylines out, figuring out who the different guardians is, what their motivations are, what each world is going to look like, why each world looks that way. So that's something that will definitely come in time. Any other questions before we break down the scene? So,
I have a question. So, I understand that when you do the quest, like, I'm assuming you get like a reward afterwards.
Mhm.
But is there like a little boss sequence that happens so that when you defeat it, you drop something, and on top of that, you get the quest?
so that's something we've talked about before. Again, if you guys have specific questions related to story and content, just go ahead and write them down so you can get with the content team later. But to answer that question, we have talked about doing boss sequences. Not necessarily boss sequences in the sense of like you enter a room and it's like an instance where you're fighting a boss, but maybe, boss characters that you have to destroy before, like as part of a quest potentially. Like we talked about item drops, items that you might get won't necessarily buff you in any way, but it could be you defeat the boss and you just happen to get one of those items that's missing on your list. But I think we would view bosses, and correct me if I'm wrong, but more as a quest element and something you have to overcome, rather than like, this is like your ultimate showdown for this thing.
Yeah, when we think of bosses, we kind of want to think of, okay, you have your different enemies per level, weak, medium, strong enemies, and then there's going to be a couple enemies here and there where they're just super strong. They might have a name, but as far as calling them a boss, giving them a name is really all we're going to do. The only boss where, you go into the room and then you have this whole instance and little story related to it is most likely going to be the last level. You can, I guess, throughout the levels, you can call them mini bosses, where they'll just be enemies that are stronger than others.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and then I had a follow-up question. So, like, when those sequences happen, will it be so that each boss is like different? So, like, certain attacks, like, because if the bosses like all are defeated by like the same move, it's just like really repetitive.
No, definitely. I'm sure, and that's something content team will work out. But I'm sure that they'll all be different. Because, like I said, each minion has its own abilities. So, say it's a boss that's hit super hard. You might have to bring out your minions who are really tanky and just have a few of your damage-dealing ones just so you can survive. Or you might have one that's really fast, so maybe you need to bring out one of your faster minions so that you can catch up with that. So, no, each of them will definitely, I'm sure without a doubt, have a different style, because that's our core mechanic, is utilizing your different minions in different ways to overcome situations that you face. So I assume each boss would be a different situation.
Yeah, every single enemy you'll have the general enemies just for feasibility that do basic stuff, attack the person in front of them, attack the 3 people in front of them. But most enemies will have their own behavior where they might ignore a certain enemy altogether and go straight to the second, or they will have an AoE attack damage. So if you summon all your skeletons and then they use their AoE and they all are dead, now you make yourself vulnerable. So there's going to be different strategies to fight each. But we have to make sure that it's feasible for technical because every different behavior can, add more work to the technical.
Yeah.
Cool. You had one?
Yeah, I have a question for the gameplay style. Have you ever played this game called Hotline Miami?
I have not.
Oh wait, Hotline Miami, is that the one that's like top down? You're going through rooms,
Yeah.
blasting people, lots of blood.
Exactly. I was going to ask if it's like somewhat similar to what this game is.
Yeah, kind of the view is somewhat similar. It's a 2D game, which is very similar.
All 8 directions, top down, as it's like
Yeah, no, definitely. What? Yeah, it's not 100% top down like that is, because that one you see just the top of his head and his shoulders. This is more of a 3/4, so you can kind of see the sides of the walls. Because that one is just the walls is just like you just see lines, This one is kind of brought, so the camera is up here for that game. This one's brought down a little bit.
It's like Diablo.
Yeah, it's like Diablo. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. It's like Diablo, but it's
Not as complicated.
yeah, it's not as complicated. Simpler than that, but it's the same camera style. Anybody else? Any other general questions? No? Okay, cool. So what we're going to do now, because we only have 8 weeks of development time, is we're going to break into our teams. I guess people who have been here before, I think you know where you broke out to before. I think programmers were up there. Who was down here? Art, and then what? Content was over here. So wherever you guys want to be, since we only have the 3 teams. So go ahead and break into your teams and get with your leads. And they're going to be issuing some direction, instructions, things like that.
You want to on the screen now?